On his first EU summit, the new Italian Prime Minister, Mario Monti, was one of the protagonists of the long marathon to save the euro and strengthen fiscal discipline in member states. Monti played the role of mediator between Great Britain and the others, seeking agreement between the 27.
Mr. President, what do you think about the agreement of the Council of Europe? Is it enough to save the euro?
Spero di sì, credo di sì, lo vedremo presto. È un accordo che è significativo.
Well, I hope so. I think so. Anyway, we will see soon. It is a significant agreement because it makes it more likely in future that countries will behave in a disciplined way regarding their budgets, so that we will not see these serious imbalances which have led to crisis in various Eurozone countries.
È importante anche perché questo vertice ha messo in opera una massa di manovra.
And it is also important because this summit has put in place a series of instruments and finances to allow us to react to the problems of one country without any immediate contagion to another or any spread of the flames. And this is why we talk about a firewall.
O di fuoco da un paese all'altro, di qui questa espressione di firewall, di barriera antifuoco che viene utilizzata.
The Brussels agreement has opened up what's being called a two-speed Europe. What do you think of that?
Se posso precisare, non è l'avvio
I want to be quite precise in this. It is not the birth of a two-speed Europe, because it already exists now, or has existed in many different forms. For example, there are countries which have signed up to the Schengen Agreement. There are those in the euro and those who are not in the single currency. In this case, Britain had specific problems. Faced with the need, especially Germany and France, to change the treaty in order to strengthen fiscal discipline, Britain said it would only change under certain conditions, ones that others did not accept.
During the negotiations, you acted as the mediator between Britain and the other European countries. What was it you least liked about this role?
Britain's Prime Minister David Cameron demanded guarantees for the city and to protect it and the country from potential new financial regulations in Europe. This seemed unacceptable to many European leaders, as well as to myself. So I suggested, and always from the perspective of the single market's interest to the British, that he, David Cameron, calls on countries in the euro area to do something to move forward and not backward. For example, looking at and working for a faster development of the digital agenda project for the single market. But he was interested only in the guarantees to protect Britain and not in moving forward, step by step, so to speak. And so the agreement failed.
So in the end, Great Britain has closed the door.
It's hard to say, but at least it will not be among the 27. In any case, I did note a strong desire not to expand the channel, in other words, not to distance Britain from other countries.
What are the consequences of Britain's no for the EU?
It's not going to be that relevant, because the European market will continue substantially to be developed by the 27 member states. Of course, if the United Kingdom had been at the heart of the Eurozone, with France, Germany and Italy, or at least even without the euro, if the UK hadn't contemptuously excluded itself, it would have been a United Kingdom that counts for more, with more influence. And given that the UK has competition and the single market in its own DNA, staying in would have been a stronger move, with benefits for all 27 countries.
The European Financial Stability Facility has been increased to 500 billion euros starting next year. Do you think these funds are sufficient?
My position was that we needed to increase these funds. and that a major firewall, as we refer to it, the fund would not necessarily lead to greater expenses for the countries that contributed to it. The increase of the fund would indeed have been sufficient to prevent market tensions, so therefore I believe contributions would not represent a real expense. But several European countries have a very limited view of what is the common interest. Anyway, if you look at this Knight package, it was agreed after a long night of negotiations. We can say that the result was not optimal, as I would say, but certainly very good.
Eurobonds are still a taboo in Europe, or is it only in Germany?
Not only for Germany, but also elsewhere. In my opinion, we do have enough arguments to convince the Germans that it is healthier to have Eurobonds than, for example, pooling everything that is done with a collective issue of the public debt quota of the different countries, a deliberate and conscious act, rather than as an afterthought. And in a way forced through the purchase by the ECB of bonds of countries that are not in a healthy financial state.
Until now, the watchwords in Europe were austerity, rigour and discipline. When do we begin to talk about growth and how to boost growth in Europe?
In recent years, there was talk of rigour and discipline because in previous decades, before Europe took on a critical consciousness, the watchword was seeking development at all costs, even at the risk of causing inflation and public deficit. Today's policies are the consequences of the mistakes of the past. Now Europe has to have a vision of reaching a more balanced way, and there has to be European policies that can fuel growth. For example, a major integration of the single market, increasing economies of scale and competitiveness of European industries in the world.
Italy has presented a budget which includes particularly harsh pension reform. It'll bring the country in line with European parameters, but the labour market remains precarious, especially for young people and those over 50, who are often the first victims of corporate restructuring. How can you ensure stability in the workplace?
It is easier said than done. This is a very important objective, both economically and socially. To ensure the stability of employment, we must first create job opportunities. In creating our economic policy, which we have prepared with a sense of urgency, we have provided specific tax breaks for companies that hire young people and women. That, I believe, is taking us in the right direction. But more must be done, and I can say we will do more.
To address the debt crisis, Italy and Greece had to call on technocrats. Did that signal the failure of politicians or a certain way of doing politics?
I hope and believe that is not the case. Maybe I'm not the best person to give you a neutral assessment, because I'm one of those technocrats now working on the inside, so to speak. In Italy, conflict between the political parties had become unbearable and exasperating. A new political coalition seemed impossible. And so what was needed was the temporary intervention of people outside the political party system in those countries. I hope that this way will prove successful.
Grazie a lei.